You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Welcome to The Open Door. Jim Hannick here with co-host Mario Ramos-Reyes. Today we are going to be talking about journalism and politics, about bringing a Christian perspective to the public square, and the American Solidarity Party's presidential primary race. Our welcome guest is Chicago's Mike Vick, a candidate for the party's presidential nomination. Let's begin, as we always do, in prayer. Come, O Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and enkindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. O God, who has taught the hearts of the faithful by the light of the Holy Spirit, grant that by the gift of the same Spirit, we may be always truly wise and ever rejoice in his consolation. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Mike, I'm going to start with three questions, and then Mario's going to swing into more philosophical matters. So start us off, will you? Could you tell us a bit about your educational and professional background?
Sure. So I went to 3 high schools and 3 colleges. From moving around quite a bit. I was a freshman at Del Norte County High School in California, Northern California coast. And then I moved to South San Francisco and ended up attending South San Francisco High School my sophomore year. Junior and senior year, I went to and graduated from Lone Oak High School, which actually no longer exists. They consolidated their high schools in my town, and they're in Paducah, Kentucky. So that school is now a middle school. I went back and saw that, but I graduated with a honors Commonwealth honors degree from Lone Oak High School. Went to Campbellsville University, which is a small Baptist school that had actually just become a university a couple years before I went there. That was my freshman year. And then I went to the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky. And then my dad gave me the opportunity to move back to California. And I jumped on that opportunity.
Who wouldn't?
Who would not? That's where I'm from. It's I would love to be back there. It's very expensive to live out there, but I did enjoy the opportunity to go back, and so I finished college at the University of San Francisco, which sounds like a state school, but it's actually a Jesuit university in San Francisco.
Still sounds like a state school to me.
It does. So the state school there is UCSF. USF is a Jesuit school. I was very happy to have attended there. I enjoyed my time there immensely. So I graduated there in 2007. Then my first job out of college, my editor at the time was looking for reporters on Catholic college campuses, and so my journalism professor recommended me. So I got a job there actually the semester before I graduated. So I had a job when I graduated, which I was very happy to have not had to wait around on that. And it was at the Catholic San Francisco newspaper, which is the official archdiocesan newspaper of the Archdiocese of San Francisco. About 75,000 circulation paper, went into all of the parishes in the Archdiocese, and had a great time there. I had a lot of opportunities that I would not have had if I had, ended up in the mailroom at the San Francisco Chronicle. I got to go to Haiti, and cover relief work that was going on down there. Got to write a lot, which, again, I would not have been able to do at a entry level job at a major newspaper. So, I was very, very grateful for that experience. And then, I honestly wanted to get out of journalism. But, I ended up moving to Paducah, Kentucky, again. And there really wasn't much opportunity to do much other than be in journalism. And so, I worked for, the TV news station. Even, there in Paducah, there wouldn't have been, a choice of the owner of the journalistic operation, because the people that own the TV station also own the local newspaper. So, but I was very, very happy to be involved in that. I met friends there at that station that I still feel like are close friends, family, in a certain sense. So yes, I had a great, experience there. Worked as a associate producer, which basically meant that I cut video, all day long. If you watch local news, productions, you'll see, national video. Somebody has to ingest that into the system and cut that for time. And so that was my job when I first got there. And then I went on to be a web editor, which basically meant that I put everything that we put out, on television, I put that on our website, and work with, advertisers to get some of their stuff, on the site as well. And so I did that for about 2.5, 3 years. And then I went to seminary, at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. I was there for about 3 semesters. My father moved up to Kankakee, and our house was, empty in Paducah. Didn't make sense to leave it empty. So I moved back to Paducah, and worked at the TV news station. My plan was to continue, my studies, at Southern online. But I'm not really built for that. I guess I needed the discipline of being on location, to continue those studies. So I ended up, getting out of that. I was still interested in leaving journalism. I kind of got stuck again at the TV station, working as a associate producer. And so, in 2016, I finally decided that I'd really had enough. And my father, again, was living up here in Kankakee, which is about an hour south of Chicago. I knew I wasn't going to be homeless. So, I left, moved into, one side of his duplex, and got a job at SEIU, which was my first job, professionally doing political work. And so I worked there as a canvasser, trying to get home care and child care workers to join the union. A lot of them didn't know that a union was available to them. And so we would go around, all around the Chicagoland area and let people know about that, and let them know about the benefits of joining the union, and get them to join the union. And then I worked for SEIU again, in Indiana, working for them on behalf of the John Gregg campaign. John Gregg was the Democratic candidate for governor, in 2016. And so that was my job, on the tail end of 2016. And then I worked for, Working America, which is AFL-CIO affiliate, doing fundraising for them. And then I did some work for Greenpeace, again, door-to-door fundraising for Greenpeace. And then I moved to Indiana and got a job with the Indiana Democratic Party. First, I was an intern, and then I worked as a tracker, which is sort of an odd job. It's almost like a political paparazzi. I would follow the opposing candidate around and, either get him on camera with any speeches that he was giving, or, try to ask him questions that he didn't want to answer and either get him answering them badly or not answering them. Either one is decent video. And so that was my job in the 2018 election. And then from 2018 until fairly recently, I worked as a canvasser and then field canvas director for Citizens Action Coalition, which is Indiana's largest consumer advocacy group, specializing in utility policy, energy policy, trying to make sure that utility companies are not gouging their customers, which they often do, and promoting green renewable energy in the state. And so I did that work for about 3 years. And then, once COVID hit, we actually didn't have a field canvas anymore. And so I was working from home as a phone canvasser for Citizens Action Coalition. And then in 2021, I moved back here to Kankakee and got a job in Chicago working for Pastor Chris Butler, who was running for Congress in the Democratic Party primary in the 1st District here in Illinois, and running as a pro-life Democrat. He was endorsed by Democrats for Life of America, as well as the American Solidarity Party, which is my party. And so I worked with him through the 2022 race, and now still work with him. Technically I'm his assistant, but the main thing that I do is I write and edit for the Chicago Civic Update, which is a publication that we put out once a week on Substack.
You've been on the front lines, behind the scenes, and everywhere in between.
I have. Now,
I read the Civic Update, and it's a distinctive publication. What's the mission? What's the goal?
Yeah, so we're operating under the auspices of the AND campaign, specifically the AND campaign's Chicago chapter. For folks who are unfamiliar with the AND campaign's goal is to get Christians, particularly Christians in the urban settings, involved in more faithful civic engagement. So, sort of pushing back against political tribalism, partisan tribalism within the church, folks who, sort of see themselves more as progressives than they do as Christians, or more as conservatives than they do as Christians. People wouldn't necessarily think of themselves that way, but that actually, has a big effect on people's political outlook. The biblical text doesn't really lend itself super well to being transposed onto either one of our major political parties. And so folks often will abandon sound doctrine in favor of whatever their political party happens to believe at that time. And so the AND campaign's goal is to sort of push back against that. And so it has a pro-life for the whole life message. more progressive on economic issues, and, more traditional on social issues. And so Ann Campaign already had an existing podcast called the Church Politics Podcast that's put out by Pastor Chris and Justin Giboni, who is the president and founder of the Ann Campaign. And so, the national organization was putting out something called IVI, which is the Invisible Institution. Very similar goal of covering news, probably more from a national perspective, with that sort of whole life Christian outlook. And so we wanted to do something similar at the local level in Chicago. And we had an existing network of pastors and Christian civic leaders, had, email addresses from them because the Ann Campaign had already been putting out sort of less ambitious monthly newsletter talking about various goings on in Chicago. And so we transferred that to Substack and now put that out weekly. And so we have, opinion columns, and we have a roundtable of, sort of a roundup of the local news that's going on that we find interesting and engaging, something that people should know about. And down the line, our plan is to have a podcast associated with it, as well as bringing on some more writers to do original reporting. We'd like to have folks at civic meetings and at the city council and at the school board doing actual original reporting. But right now it's mostly Pastor Chris and I, and, folks from the Chicago chapter of the Ann Campaign, putting together this product once a week. And folks can find it at thecivicupdate.com, and you can subscribe there.
Now, just one illustration for us. Chicago has completed its mayoral race, and you folks covered it, I think, in a very constructive, original, probing way. Now, most of our audience are not Chicagoans, but it'd be good to have an example of how you look at a race for mayor, which would be potentially very divisive, and how you approach that.
Well, so one of the ways that we approached it was by hosting a forum of our own. We did that in partnership with the Chicago various Christian groups, civic groups here in Chicago Partnership, and Campaign as well. So it was the Faith and Politics Forum, which you can find that, as a video on thecivicupdate.com. But that forum was hosted by Ann Campaign affiliated pastors, and brought together all the candidates. In Chicago, we actually have a sort of two-tiered election system where if the candidate who gets the most votes didn't get 50% plus one vote, they go to a runoff. So the top two candidates ended up in a runoff. That's happened the last, I believe, 3 times here in Chicago. And so yeah, we were there on the ground, getting the candidates involved in answering questions that were coming from that sort of whole life Christian perspective. And I believe we were probably one of the only times they ever had to answer a question about abortion that wasn't coming from someone who was in favor of abortion. So I thought that was a good experience for the candidates to have to answer those kinds of questions. And so we hosted that. That was very shortly before the first round of voting. But unlike some of the other publications, we were not really interested in getting involved in endorsing a candidate. We really wanted to bring folks together around a set of issues. Post-election, we are potentially talking about planning a unity breakfast for pastors, because it did end up splitting folks a lot more than some of the previous elections in terms of who they were supporting, whether they are supporting the candidate who ended up winning, Brandon Johnson, or Paul Vallis. And so we wanted to kind of bring folks together. Several of our columns in the run-up to the election and the aftermath of the election have been about civic unity. And so, regardless of who folks voted for, we all have to live in the city. We all have to move forward together. And so that's sort of been what we've promoted throughout the campaign.
All right. Thanks for that. Mario, do you want to lead us ahead into matters more philosophical than tactical and strategic?
Well, perhaps that, this is very interesting, your journey. You talk a lot about politics and the faith. How would you describe your political philosophy and how your political philosophy developed over time?
Sure. So, I was involved in political work, since I was, much, much too young to vote. My father was involved in Democratic Party politics when I was a kid. We had Congress people come to my house when I was a kid. So, I've been involved in political work for a long time. Starting in 2016, I got involved in it professionally, but, I've been engaged in it for a long time. My degree is in political science. It's something that I've cared about deeply for a long time. I grew up really more on the political left. Again, I grew up in the Democratic Party, but we also were raised in church, and I sort of took both things to heart. My mother was raised Catholic. I've been around Catholics a lot in my life, whether it was the job that I had, university I graduated from, now the political party that I'm engaged in. And I often joke that I sort of accidentally recreated Catholic social teaching within my own head, by being involved in Democratic Party politics, but also involved in a very conservative Christian church. And so I sort of look at things, my, political philosophy really from more of a faith background than sort of a political background. I see things through the lens of that faith. And so, I have a whole life perspective. I care about babies in the womb. I also care about babies once they're born. I care about adults, making sure that folks have a good economic situation, good paying jobs. So I sort of evolved over time on that. I grew up again on the left of the Democratic Party, got involved in 2016 in Bernie Sanders' campaign, and so got involved philosophically in some of the sort of to the left of the Democratic Party, democratic socialist politics, I joined and am still a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. And from 2016 until around 2021, I did identify as a Democratic Socialist and then later a Libertarian Socialist. And then when I got involved in the American Solidarity Party, I had sort of been primed to have an affinity for the economics that I see in the Solidarity Party, which is termed distributism. It originated with Catholic social teaching, Rerum Novarum, from I believe it was Pope Leo the 13th, but someone can correct me on that.
Now, is it Rerum Novarum? Is that a Polish expression?
It's a Latin expression. So I don't speak Latin, but Rerum Novarum, I believe it was published in the late 1890s. But in any event, folks can look that up. That's where distributism comes from. The idea is that you want to have as widely distributed productive capital as possible. And you do that through things like worker cooperatives, credit unions, housing cooperatives, land reform, things like that, community land trusts. And so, I had heard of many of these things, and they were often described to me as socialism. The most prominent purveyor of pro worker cooperative ideas in this country would probably be Richard Wolff, who is a self-described Marxian economist and does a podcast called The Economic Update, and has an organization that he founded called Democracy at Work. And so I had heard about worker cooperatives long before I joined the American Solidarity Party, and liked the idea of it very much so. But, again, it was described to me as socialism, or a form of socialism. And I had never heard of distributism. And when I joined ASP, I started learning more about that from various folks in the party, among them John Madej, who wrote a book about distributism. And, so the more I delved into that, the more it seemed like the kind of thing that I would ascribe to. And so, now sort of my political philosophy is that I am a whole life distributist. But again, it sort of comes out of my desire to see my politics mesh well with my faith, rather than sort of the other way around, which is often what happens. People mold their faith beliefs based on whether they're a Republican or a Democrat. So yeah, that's sort of where I've come from, the pro-life left, so to speak. And so coming into the American Solidarity Party, I was very much enamored with their political philosophy, and that's where I land nowadays.
How did you find the American Solidarity Party?
So in 2020, I was running as a state rep candidate in Indiana's 29th district, which is centered around Noblesville, Indiana, which is a northeast suburb of Indianapolis. And I ended up being the nominee of the Democratic Party in that race, and was involved in 2020, as folks will recall. Bernie Sanders was running again, and I was very much supportive of his candidacy in 2020. And around midsummer, it became clear that he was not going to win. Things sort of got stacked against him again. in the Democratic primary. And, by that time, I had sort of had enough of the Democratic Party. I did not fit their message well economically. They were well to the right of me on those issues, and I did not fit well with them on social issues, where they were well to the left of me. And so I was looking for something else. In 2016, I had already, voted for the Green Party candidate in Jill Stein in that race. I had voted for a few other independent candidates in the intervening years. And so I had kind of already had one foot out the door of the Democratic Party. But I didn't know where I was going to go. I wasn't super interested in actually joining the Green Party, which, to be honest, is a rather dysfunctional group politically. And I briefly thought about a nascent group called the Movement for a People's Party, but I found that the organizers of that were not really on the level. And so I was looking for something new. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have a political candidate for president that I was supporting, that I, knew that I was going to vote for in November. And so I was looking for a candidate. And that's how I found the American Solidarity Party, by looking for a candidate for president. And in 2020, the American Solidarity Party had nominated Brian Carroll for president and Amar Patel for vice president. And I got to know both of them. I actually spoke on the phone with Amar for about half an hour when I first learned about the party, which was very interesting to me, to be able to speak to the party's vice presidential nominee like 5 days after I found out about the party. I was able to speak with Patrick Harris, who at the time was the chair of the party, and with various other folks involved in leadership in the party, and was very enamored with the party's message. Again, they were pro-life and really more conservative on social issues, and more progressive on economic issues, which is where I was. And, it didn't fit me 100%, but it was the closest that I'd ever seen in a political party to something that, if I were making a political party from scratch, this would be what it was. And so I got involved in that party in 2020. Indiana law, election law, is a little rigid in terms of, once you're a party's nominee, you could be removed from the ballot if you did things that the party thought were, sort of beyond the pale. And one of those would probably be deciding to endorse another party's candidate for president, or certainly leave the party or formally join another party. And so I didn't formally join the party until 2021, but I did publicly endorse Brian and Amar for president in 2020 while I was running as a Democrat. I believe I'm the only nominee of a major party to have endorsed Brian and Amar in 2020. So yeah, I got involved again in summer of 2020. In 2021, I joined the party officially. And later in 2021, I became the chair briefly of the Indiana State Committee for the party. And ran for delegate to the national convention. Didn't end up getting that because I didn't know very many people in the region. It's a sort of a regional thing, and so didn't get that in 2021. But then I moved back to Illinois, got involved in Pastor Chris's campaign, got him the endorsement of the American Solidarity Party. And in 2022, I ran again for national delegate and won. And so I was involved in the national convention in 2022. And later in 2022, I was hired by the party to do work for them doing fundraising. My official title was the National Development Director. So I had previously done fundraising work in politics. That was a lot of what I did in politics. So I was very happy to be able to use those skills to help the party fundraise. And I did that up until the point when I decided that I was going to run for the party's presidential nomination this time around. The other thing that I've done in the party is I co-founded a group called the Liberation Caucus. And Liberation Caucus is an affinity group of folks that are coming into the party or are already in the party from the left, from the political left in American politics. And so our goal was to provide a place of camaraderie for people who, were coming into the party from the left. Most of the people that are coming into the party are coming in from either the Republican Party or just generally more conservative. And so we wanted to find a place, sort of a soft landing spot for people that were coming in from either the Democratic Party or the Green Party or just generally from the left of American politics. And so that's what we did. I co-founded that group with Bill Fleming, who at the time was the host of the party's official podcast. And so we've been, building that group ever since, and trying to bring folks into the party from the left of American politics. That's sort of how I came across the party. Yeah, go ahead.
You've been practically everywhere in the last few years, and so you know how important it is to kind of dig deeper, see what's going on.
Yeah.
Would you believe that Kamala Harris has suggested that the American Solidarity Party is a front for an extremist group known as the Knights of Columbus?
So it would surprise me if Kamala Harris had ever mentioned the Solidarity Party or knew what the Solidarity Party was, let alone that it was a front for another organization. But I do personally know a number of people in the party who are members of the Knights of Columbus.
Which he has identified as an extremist group. The
Knights of Columbus has a sort of different political background. Most of the people involved in it have sort of different political background than I do. But yeah, I mean, the idea that that's an extremist organization is rather laughable if it weren't so dangerous, to think such. But
well, Mike, that they're no longer allowed to wear their swords in public.
Well, I never.
Do we have an outbreak of sword violence going on in the country? I'm not aware of.
Go ahead, Mario.
Well, I don't have a sword. I'm a Knight of Columbus. Carrying member of Knight Columbus.
Well, you got to be a sword carrying member then, I guess.
No, it's no longer allowed. I want to say I'm not now, nor have I ever been a card-carrying member, much less a sword-bearing member of the Knights, although they're an exemplary group. Mario, push us ahead now.
Well, just one comment. Well, some people have described America as a nation at war with itself. Do you think that claim or observation is correct? What do you think about it?
So I think it's hard not to agree with that notion. I mean, you look at our history, we actually did fight a war with ourselves. Folks are aware of this. It was called the American Civil War. The fact that we didn't really deal with, our one of our two original sins, slavery in this country. In order to maintain the Union, we sort of shoved that under the rug, and eventually that developed into the Civil War that we know of in the 1860s. And that problem never really totally went away. There was a period during Reconstruction when people of African descent in America were afforded a great deal more civil rights and civic engagement than they had been prior to the Civil War, and that they had been at any time prior to the Civil Rights Movement. But that ended, and ended rather violently. The founding of the Ku Klux Klan and various other white supremacist organizations ended Reconstruction in America. And so, until the Civil Rights Movement, we had a sort of caste system in the country. And so the remnants and the echoes of that still reverberate to this day. And we're still dealing with issues of systemic racism in the country. We're still dealing with folks who have racial grievances in the country. And we still have, a very tiered system economically, where folks who, whether they're people of color or working class white folks, we'd like to think that we live in a meritocracy, but it's actually very difficult to move economic, from one economic strata to another. So, I think that on many levels, we are at war with each other, whether that's rich against poor, working class against the capitalist class, whites against everyone else. And so, I definitely think that there is a degree to which it is accurate to say that we are a nation at war with itself. We're a nation that just fairly recently experienced an invasion of our own capital by our own citizens. And so certainly there are serious tensions at work and at play in this country. And, I would just say that the divisions have been sown for decades, for really 2 centuries now. And it will be difficult to move in a better direction. But, I think that the organizations that I'm involved with now, that's the goal, is to get people to sort of put down the weapons, either real or rhetorical, and to stop thinking of themselves as tribal Democrats, tribal Republicans, and to think of themselves, in our case, as Christians first. And, given that the country still is majority Christian, I think that there is a room for that to have a good effect on folks, whether they're Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, to see themselves as Christian first and to engage in the culture in a constructive, less tribally partisan way.
Mike, we often see discussions about how third parties might gain traction and how our current times might be just the times for third parties to do so. But simultaneously, we see commentators saying it's not going to happen. There's too much at stake. There's too much to be lost if you're a Republican and the Republicans don't get in, if you're a Democrat and the Democrats don't get in. This is no time to experiment. What would you say to people like that?
Well, at the presidential level, I would say that, most people who say that don't really understand or are counting on you not understanding how a presidential race works. We do not have in this country a national popular vote. We've experienced 2 times, just in my lifetime, of a president not getting the popular vote and still winning the Electoral College and becoming the president. And so you have to look at the presidential race as 50, plus, Guam and Puerto Rico elections at the state level, popular elections at the state level. And again, in the presidential race, I lived in Indiana. I live now in Illinois. I lived in California. California, deeply blue state. Illinois, deeply blue state. Indiana, deeply red state.
Kentucky.
Each of those, certainly I did live in Kentucky, also deeply red state. In each of those states, the person that you're voting for, if you're voting for the losing candidate, you have quote unquote wasted your vote, which is often the charge that's levied against third party voters, that you're wasting your vote. You could have voted for Mickey Mouse and you would have had the exact same effect on the Electoral College. So you're actually, millions of people who are voting for a major party candidate are wasting their vote. In California, in, voting for a Republican, in Indiana, voting for a Democrat, in Illinois, voting for a Republican. So it's actually more effective to vote for a third party candidate because you have the potential of getting that candidate 5% nationally, which would end up with, public matching funds in the next election. You have the potential to help that candidate's party get on the ballot in subsequent elections. So in my view, you've got to look at that, as a reality. Also, millions of people who vote for the winning candidate in these elections also wasted their vote because you only need 50% plus one vote. So if your candidate wins by 1 million votes in your state, 1 million people didn't need to vote for them still to have won. So, many of those people, if they did not like the candidate they were voting for, and the major party could have voted for a third party, and it would not have changed the outcome whatsoever. So I think you've got to look at it like that. We have very few swing states in the country. And, even if you live in a swing state, there are ad hoc workarounds that you could do. You have we've all got friends in other parties in our same state, who also don't like their candidate in their party. So if I in 2020 didn't like Joe Biden, and I've got a friend in Illinois who doesn't like Donald Trump, if we're worried about the being in a swing state, which Illinois is not, but let's say it is, if we're worried about the spoiler effect, if we both pledge to vote for a third party candidate, we've eliminated the spoiler effect for ourselves. Now, there are ways to eliminate the spoiler effect that are holistic, but the major parties are not really willing to do the kind of electoral reforms that are necessary to make that happen. And so, until and unless that happens, we're not going to see a major move toward third parties at the national level. You can certainly see it at the state level, at the local level, in certain states. But we need those sort of electoral reforms. Now, the reality is that we're going into an election where it's at this point highly likely that the candidates will be the same unpopular candidates that we had in the last election.
Oh, say it ain't so.
It's unfortunate, but that's the reality that we're looking at. And so, given the fatigue with those candidates, it's definitely possible that we could see a resurgence of third party voters. Again, though, it's really unlikely that it will be any kind of a major wave until and unless we see the electoral reforms that we need to pass in order to give third parties a better shot, give voters a better shot, really, of making their voices heard. But I would just say again, if you love your major party candidate, if that's like where your politics are, you're a tried and true Republican, tried and true Democrat, then go vote your conscience in the election. Vote for the candidate that best represents you. But if you're holding your nose, in most states, you just don't need to do that. In most states, it's perfectly safe to vote for the candidate that you actually care about, that you actually want to see in office. And that's what democracy is supposed to be about. We're supposed to be going to the ballot and casting a vote for the candidate that we like, not the candidate that we hate the least. And so that's really where we need to be moving.
One last question. You've been at politics for a long time, and you're getting in deeper, big muddy, deeper and deeper. And Lord knows how you're going to feel after Election Day. What do you do to renew your spirits? What do you do to strengthen your heart?
Well, as I've said throughout this interview, I am a Bible-believing Christian. And so the place that I go to renew my spirit is the church. And I am very grateful to be involved in a vibrant, faith-based community here in the Chicagoland area. And my pastor is the man that I work with and work for, Pastor Chris Butler. Folks can listen to his sermons. If you've never heard him speak, it's quite an engagement at Chicago Embassy Church Network. We meet in South Holland, which is a suburb of Chicago, and that's where I get my renewal. at the church, by reading scripture, and, prayer. So, that really should be, and for me is what it's all about, is working to build a world that better reflects my faith. And so where I would like to go, or where I do go, when I'm feeling down about political situations or really any other thing in my life, is back to my faith.
We're going to end with today's gospel, post-resurrection account coming from the gospel according to Luke. That very day, the first day of the week, 2 of Jesus' disciples were going to a village 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus. And they were conversing about all the things that had occurred. And it happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing as you walk along?" They stopped, looking downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, said to him in reply, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" And he replied to them, "What sorts of things?" They said to him, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. How our chief priests and rulers both handed him over to a sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that he would be the one to redeem Israel. And besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since this took place. Some women from our group, however, have astounded us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and they did not find his body. They came back and reported that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who announced that he was alive. Then some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found things just as the women had described, but they did not see him." And he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets spoke. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them what referred to him in all the scriptures. As they approached the village to which they were going, he gave the impression that he was going on farther. But they urged him, "Stay with us. It's nearly evening and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. And it happened that while he was with them at table, he took bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them. With that, their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, but he vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he spoke to us on the way and opened the scriptures to us?" So they set out at once and returned to Jerusalem, where they found gathered together the 11 and those with them who were saying, "The Lord has truly been raised and has appeared to Simon." Then the 2 recounted what had taken place on the way and how he was made known to them in the breaking of the bread. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Thank you, Michael, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. My pleasure.
Best wishes in the campaign.
Thank you, sir.
See you later.
You all have a good day.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.